All right, this is our last discussion for the book, Things That Carried by Tim O'Brien. All right. So we finished it. Ending was actually kind of boring compared to the other stories.
Yeah.
Because the last two chapters, it was the last two, I think, right? That they were more of him just kind of just recapping everything.
Yeah.
I thought the second one, it's like the last one was where he was talking about the guy who killed himself, Rat Kiley.
Maybe, was that the second last or was that the third last chapter?
It was one of those.
Somewhere around in there.
It was, so, yeah, that was like the last war story, is what I would call it.
Well, I thought the last chapter was kind of like him tying together the story to like show what happened to him and like how he couldn't save his friend and then he couldn't save his other friends in the war as well.
Yeah.
So kind of like the aftermath of whatever happened.
Yeah. Everything that
He's had to deal with it his whole life.
everything that affected him the most, he was basically recapping. What do you think, Josh?
There's a deeper meaning to the last chapter. He's talking about how stories are like they help remember people and the things that they did.
Right.
He's remembering his past with the stories, as well as other people he's met along the way.
So basically, he's just kind of honoring his friends by remembering them.
Yeah, we talked about that in our last discussion.
We did.
Yeah, you remember we were talking about all the people that like were dying, and like they
Some
would
important
laugh
things.
because they were honoring them instead of feeling bad about it.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of the last chapter, that was my first question. So like well said, he wraps it up, ties it all together. So my question was, why do you think that Tim O'Brien wrote this entire book and some of the options? I decided to put some options down. Like, was it just to inform people about the Vietnam War, or if you look at the last sentence, it says, "I realize it is as Tim trying to save Timmy's life with the story." So that makes me think that him writing this book is getting everything off his chest.
I think a little bit of both. Like he wanted to get that off his chest, so he wasn't just holding it in the rest of his life. But he also wanted to inform people that maybe had grandparents or parents that were in the war, so then they would know what he went through and probably what they went to do.
Yeah. I think it'd possibly also be to inform, because, I mean, Vietnam was how long ago, Josh? Good math guy.
Like
But
50 years
anywho,
ago, it was.
yeah, like 50 some odd years ago. But I mean, a lot of the people that experienced it are no longer alive, and the ones who did survive and are still alive today, they might not be able to talk to it.
Right.
They might have
It's too hard for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That and medically.
Right.
Within another 50 years, there's not going to be anyone from Vietnam left. All we'll have is stories. I mean, this would be a great, yes, it's solid. It's a book, but yes, it's a book. A book with lots of memorable stories.
Yeah.
In a book.
So do you think
That is true.
that's also a reason maybe why he wrote it? Just because it's memorable stories about how his friends, and maybe he's just trying to remember his friends better? Could that be another reason?
Yeah, because like it said, like Josh said, it's about how the stories are like how you remember people, and like when you're telling the stories, you're like you forget that they're dead. Like you still remember them like for being alive and not being dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he writes the book to like share the stories so like people can look back and remember the stories of what actually happened and like see how people were at that time. So.
What do you think, Josh? I mean, don't get me wrong. I hate putting you on the spotlight, but I'm trying to help you out here. So.
He was just responding to the thing I said about him.
How about another question?
So
Okay, I got one.
All right.
Speaking of stories, why do you think the author would not tell his daughter about the stories that happened?
Are you kidding me?
Well,
I would protect her innocence.
Okay, well,
to protect his reputation from her. I mean, if she knew that he had killed people, she might think less of him. And she's what, 9, 10?
10, I think.
I
Well,
think
there we go.
She
might
was
not.
also like kind of ashamed for what he did.
yeah, there's that. I wrote a
He still
note.
blames himself.
I wrote a note down when I put that same exact question into mine. That I think it's protect like her innocence and just to save her, just like I think that he tried to save himself in his book. He just doesn't want her to know all the things that he knows and he has to deal with every
Yeah.
day.
Doesn't want her to experience the
Right.
horrors of
Or
war.
even just have to think about that.
Yeah. What do you think, Josh?
Okay, don't do that.
Uh,
Okay. Another thing I was thinking about is why do you think his daughter was bothering him so much about trying to figure out what he did or if he killed people?
I think it's just because she's a kid and kids are curious.
I don't think it has that deep of a meaning.
Don't do it, right?
Josh,
all right.
what do you think about this?
I was thinking maybe like she heard something
Maybe.
that happened, like maybe this person did this thing to this person and was very curious to see what her dad did.
Right.
Maybe find out exactly what he did over there.
For one of my journal entries, I took a quote and I probably should have written that down, but I think I remember it. It was that chapter about Kathleen and when he took her to that place. And she would ask him, "Did you kill anyone?" And then, like, quote unquote, he said that honestly, I would say no. And then he said, other times, I would say honestly, yes. So I'm not sure why he said honestly, even if it's a lie.
In his mind, he felt responsible for the deaths of several of the people that, like, his fellow soldiers actually killed.
Uh-huh.
Like, in the chapter of the man I killed, he presented it as if he actually killed the man, whereas I believe it was the next chapter, we found out that he was just present when the man died.
Wait, so like, he just feels responsible?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think, Wells?
Why do you keep doing that? Don't do that. If someone has an opinion to share, they'll share it.
All right, fine.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have an opinion?
Not strong one though.
Anywho, one of the questions I had was trying to choose which one. How did the men remember the war after the war? Like, think of it after the war. How did they remember that?
Well, Tim O'Brien tells how he remembered it, and he remembers it as like a bad experience, but then he also has some good times with like his friends when he tells a story about the one guy who went trick or treating in the town.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
South Lavender.
Yeah.
So like he remembers him as like a fun time there. But then he also talks about how when you're in the war, he said he kind of missed it when he was put at some camp or whatever where he didn't have to go out into the woods. He said he missed it. So I think like he looks back and he realizes that it was a bad time, but then he also kind of misses the like thrill of it and like being with the guys.
I feel like it's different for each person because some people come back with PTSD. They don't want to remember that,
Yeah.
but they do.
Right.
So they're gonna remember it forever, and it's just gonna be like those horrible memories of it.
Yeah. Plus, you might feel like, I mean, if we were to go into a war together, and I'm just using you guys as an example, sorry, but say Levi gets hurt somehow, I'm not going to go into detail
Breaks his ankle.
again, and say Tyler and Wells help him come back from the brink of death, I don't know. Would that make you three feel closer in friendship?
Yeah.
There you go. Point proven.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
There we go.
Tough times bring people together.
Yeah.
He said so.
There was also that part where Tim and I can't remember the one guy's name, but
Was
Call him that one guy.
when they did the ammo cartridges with the string attached to the guy in the bunker, and they tricked that guy.
Yeah.
Is that guy's name Azar? Something like that?
Yeah, Ajon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and then the other guy was some German name. It sounded like
Bobby Jurgensen.
Yeah, Jurgensen.
Big
And
one.
when they were pranking him afterwards, he like went up to the bag and he like shot it again and then he yelled Tim's name. And then after that they were like friends again and they had been even. So I think like that part of it, like he would remember as a good memory from it.
Yeah. Okay.
Tyler?
You gonna do that now?
Wait, why does he get to do it and I don't?
Wait, you guys haven't. Oh, no. Okay.
No.
That's it. All right. So my second question was, why does O'Brien feel regret for that guy that he says that he killed?
He could have said something and warned the guy, and he could have saved the guy's life, but he didn't.
He could have helped him.
Or what if
Since
he
didn't.
thinks that he is actually the one that did the most in killing him?
Because he didn't help.
I mean, makes
I
sense.
mean, wouldn't you feel the same?
Yeah, I would not. I wouldn't feel great about it now.
I just want to be put out of my misery.
Yeah. Well.
I mean, prolonging the pain.
That's also kind of like the part where the guy got sucked under the mud.
Mm-hmm.
He
Yeah.
was trying to save him, but he couldn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't his fault, but then he feels personally responsible for the death of him.
Yeah. Wrote a letter to
He's
his
like,
father too.
Yeah, he could have saved him, but he wasn't strong enough.
Tyler?
Don't do that.
All right, I got a question.
Just trying to help.
What do you think the real reason is that Kylie killed himself? Because they said that he was being bothered by the bugs, but I think that the bugs were like,
He shot himself in his foot.
no, the real reason why he killed himself.
No, he shot himself in his foot, not in
He
his
didn't kill
head.
himself.
Well, he died though. He did. He committed suicide.
He shot himself in his foot so that he would get to go home.
You know, they say he OD'd.
Did he really?
He took a bunch of drugs and then shot himself in the foot.
And then he got sent home in a helicopter.
Did he
He
ever
got
die?
sent to Japan. And
He died on the way
Yeah.
there.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was hard to understand.
How do I forget something like that?
See, yeah.
it's at the
I thought that he
What
just
got
shot
it?
himself in the foot just so he could leave.
oh maybe he did.
What do you think, Tyler?
I don't even know what the question is right now.
So, yeah,
Maybe I interpreted it wrong. He didn't kill himself.
I thought he just shot himself in the
He
foot.
shot
to get
himself
out
in the
of there.
foot, but it also said he doped himself up, so I didn't know.
I think that was so that he didn't feel pain. That was definitely difficult to understand to me because it was just so quickly. It was just at the end of that chapter.
I feel like he just did that to get out of there because those
He couldn't
things,
take it anymore.
like I think it was the bugs or whatever were metaphor
Yeah, that's
of
what I
every
was-
single thing bothering him.
There was still actual bugs
Yeah,
that were annoying. But
I feel like everything that was bothering him just kept piling up, and he just
Yeah.
needed to get out of there, so he did anything he could.
Yeah, because I thought the bugs were like a metaphor for like the people who he could have saved, like because he was the medic. So like he could have, like if somebody got shot and he couldn't save him, I think like the bugs were a metaphor for the people he could have saved, like coming
Yeah.
back and like tearing away his sanity.
Well, in that same chapter, he's talking about how he couldn't take it anymore, seeing like all these half dead people that he has to help. And he says something like, "I've seen so many like people's like livers and
Yeah.
kidneys and stuff that now I like see my own."
So, one of the questions I had, how did the deaths of their comrades affect each other and themselves?
Like Josh said, tough times. What was it he said?
Pull
Tough
back together.
times bring people together.
Yeah. So the people that actually end up surviving, they are the ones that are thriving.
Don't break your foot. It brings people together.
Right.
Bells?
I think the deaths bring them together. Well, the ones that were left became even closer and closer
Right.
with everyone that started to fall. because there was less and less people. So then you bring your group down, and then you get to know those really well. But if then they died, then it hurts you.
But I
more.
think
Right.
that's why Vietnam got so bad because people keep dying, and then like we agreed on, people get closer after the tough times, and then you lose those people that you're really close to,
Mhm.
and it just messes with your head.
Yeah, because if you're distant with someone, their deaths are gonna hurt you. They're still gonna hurt you, but not as much
Right.
as if someone that's really close to you. So it's hard. War is hard and painful.
I had a question about just one specific death, and I said, "How do you think the author took Kiwa's death?"
The
What?
worst, probably Kiowa. Remember?
Oh yeah,
That
How do you
guy got
think
sucked
about
under the mud, wasn't
Yeah. Okay.
At one point in the story, he said that he felt like he got sucked under the mud that day too. And when he went back and put his moccasins in the river, he felt like that was him finally clawing his way out of the mud.
Yeah, that's kind of like one of the quotes I had. I said, "The night when Kiowa got wasted, I sort of sank into the sewage with him." I think that's what you're talking about. He just felt like he was in the same place he was. He didn't feel right anymore.
Right.
It definitely seemed to me like Kiowa was his closest friend, and then losing him like that, like Wells brought up, if he had lost him just because Kiowa had gotten shot, obviously he'd still be upset. But when he blames himself, it's so much worse.
Right.
There's a big difference between something you can't control and something you could possibly control.
Can't exactly stop a bullet.
Right.
Could have
Right.
pulled him out of the mud. One of my questions was, how many details of a nonfiction story can you change before it becomes fictional? Because several details about some of the stories in here he changed to better suit his mindset about it. Like the chapter "The Man I Killed," he felt responsible for it, so he told the story as if he actually was responsible for that man's death.
That chapter just confused me because of that. But once you say that, now I realize like what you mean by that.
It's a hard question, but yeah.
Um,
Like I said in our last discussion, it was some of the people who write these types of stories dilute some of them to make them more bearable.
yeah, sometimes it's for good. I think most of the time, especially in this book, he's doing it right for the good of the people, for his sanity, and then for the people who are reading it.
Right.
I don't think he does it in a bad way at all.
I think it becomes fictional when you just add fake information. Like, that was how he thought of it. So it's not really fake, it's just what he was thinking. If you start adding fake things like saying like he literally did when he didn't, or saying that this guy died because of this reason and he didn't, then I would say that's fiction.
I believe it was Ted Lavender started adding details to that trick-or-treating story, saying that he took the pajamas off of a sleeping person and put them in a bag. He probably just
I remember
held
that.
a gun up
That's
to him and
funny.
just handed him a pair of pajamas from a drawer or something. That
Maybe
makes
he
the
did
story
both.
more fictional rather than adding to the meaning of it.
I will just say my question, which Tyler was pretty close to. Mine said, is there a reason why the author doesn't tell Kathleen what actually happened? And we talked about that. I talked about how it was to save her, but I do have another question. It's kind of a smaller one. It's not part of my 3. But over all the book, what tone does O'Brien use? If you could use 1 or 2 words.
Powerful.
It's definitely powerful. See, usually a nonfiction book is a lot of times it's informative. Like when I read
Right.
the Trevor Noah book, that was informative, but this just doesn't seem as informative to me. I mean, he's telling us stories, but it's more in a deeper sense because he's talking about himself and his friends so much. So I just had difficulty coming up with a word for what I would want to use.
It is still informative, just not as much as an actual.
I was
Back-
just thinking there would be a better word for it.
To remember the people that were in the stories, I guess.
Honorable, I guess.
Yeah.
is what
Honor
the-
their
Honorable.
deaths. And
Yeah.
the things they
Honorable and
did.
powerful.
Memorable, honorable,
Graphic.
definitely.
Yeah.
At least there were no flying hearts in this one.
Alright, so I got a question. It was, how do you think O'Brien's experience with Linda changed him and shaped him as an adult and in the war?
Seemed like that was his first experience with storytelling. He didn't realize it at the time, but him dreaming about her was him telling stories about her to himself, remembering her, honoring her.
Hang on, I have to wrap my head around what you just said. Okay, yeah, it makes sense now.
I think that she might have been actually a big reason why he wrote the book. Like you said, that was his first story. Maybe that's what made him good at this. And she definitely made him soft a little bit, but not in like a bad way. In a way where he misses his friends and wants to
Right.
get it off his chest.
Yeah, it
Like
makes you want to keep going.
has those feelings again that he didn't have back then.
Yeah. And it really surprised me how much like Linda meant to him because she died when she was what, 9?
Give or take.
Yeah. So I don't know how someone can make such a big effect on your life before they even turn 10.
I think the younger they are, or the older they are, that the more impact it has.
Huh.
It's like,
Most of the time, yeah.
I have a question, and it goes along with one of my journal entries I did. I said, "Why do you think in 4th grade the officer wished he would have stood up for that girl who was getting picked on?" And then for my quote, it was, he wished he would have stepped in because Vietnam presents much harder choices. Some practice at being brave might have helped. It's like being brave and standing up. Why do you think he wished he would have stood up?
Because that was like practice for when he lost Kiowa, for when he blamed himself for the guy dying. So maybe he thought that if that had been different, then so would the other instances.
I think it has something to do with not helping her during her last days before she died.
so I've got another question. How did the deaths of his friends shape him into who he was? Or help shape him into who he was? Like he was surrounded by friends in the war, and a lot of them died, and that affected him and changed him. But my question is, was it for the good or for the worse?
In a real sense, it's obviously for the bad because he's losing friends.
Right.
But emotionally, I don't know. I don't know if I would consider that good still.
Right.
But I definitely think that it made him think more.
I think it might have made him a better person because he learned to love his friends, and then since he lost them, he knows that like you can't have these things forever. Like nothing lasts forever. So like he cherishes his daughter more because he knows he won't always be around for her, or she might not always be around for him. So
Because anything can happen.
Treasure what you can while you have it.
In my journal entries, there was a couple of appeals that I found in the book. Most of them were actually logos, and the reason it appeals to emotion so much, and never is it appealing to like funny emotion. It's always feeling bad. for whoever the character is. So is the author actually intending for us to feel bad for what all the things that happened to him? Or is it just facts and it just sucks?
I think he left it up to us to decide whether we,
So he wasn't asking for us to feel bad.
No.
for him.
I think he was just trying to get his story out there
Yeah.
and like let people know what happened to him.
Yeah.
Because like if you feel bad for him, like you can feel bad for him, like you probably should because like the stuff that happened to him is bad. But if you don't, like he's not trying to force you to feel bad for him. He's just trying.
I feel like he definitely said it not to get sympathy, but just to tell people. Like, if people feel bad for him, I bet he would be like, okay. But if people went up to him and asked him more facts about it, I bet he'd be more happy about that. Like, them learning about it.
Yeah.
Rather than, hey, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't think he would care if people felt bad for him because people feeling bad for him isn't going to bring his friends back or anything. So I don't think he really cared about that.
But he definitely would have liked to share stories with people.
I think he uses so many like emotionally loaded words and phrases to help get us into his mindset and understand how he interpreted the things that happened.
Yeah.
Like when he talked about how good of a medic Rat Kiley was when he got shot the first time, before he started talking about how bad of a job Jurgensen did, and then the story about him getting revenge on him. Because like if he just said that story about getting revenge on Jurgensen, then we would feel like the author's the bad guy in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of changes the perspective on that.
Right.
He talked about like when he was up above him and watching him, how he felt like he was down there with him, and like that he felt what he felt, and he really did feel what he felt.
And I found, while reading yesterday, I found a quote I think goes along with this. I'm going to read it. When a man died, there had to be blame. Jimmy Cross understood this. You could blame the war. You could blame the idiots who made the war. You could blame Kiowa for going to it. You could blame the rain. You could blame the river. You could blame the field, the mud, the climate. You could blame the enemy. You could blame the mortar rounds. You could blame people who were too lazy to read a newspaper, who were bored by the daily body counts, who switched channels at the mention of politics. I feel like that when he put that quote down, I think it was thinking about himself when he was blaming. Because if he felt guilty about it, he's going to blame it on himself.
Uh-huh.
But in this case, he was doing the opposite. He was blaming everything else.
In some cases like that, when you know that it's not your fault, you're going to blame everyone you can.
Right.
Or if you do feel like it's your fault, you might try to
Yeah.
blame everything else
I
just so
think-
you don't feel as bad.
I think that's
Yeah.
why he says you could, as in like you don't have to. He goes, you could. He lists pretty much everything that at least I could think of before he says himself.
Yeah.
So maybe secretly he is blaming himself and then just giving everyone every single option except for him.
Yeah, because to himself, he inside, like, you know how you can say stuff in your head. Well, he might be telling himself, I did it, or I blame myself. But out loud to other people, he might be saying, oh, it wasn't me, it was the river, the climate, the mud, the mortar rounds, everything else.
I think those are like things that like in his head he's trying to say like, oh, it wasn't me, it was the mortar rounds did it. But in the back of his mind, he knows that, or he feels that he was responsible for his death, and so he's trying to say those things as like a cover for himself. But
Mhm.
in the end, he knows that.
Yeah, and he goes like down the line of something that could happen. People that started the war, people in the war, people that shot the mortar shells itself. He's just trying to find anything besides blaming himself to us.
So does anyone have any more questions?
I could.
I can.
What do you guys think of his return to Vietnam?
I think it was bold. Seems like that would be a difficult thing to do.
Definitely. I
I
mean,
think he wanted closure.
Just like, I think that's why it puts it at the end, because the end is supposed to be his closure of the war. So was a good placement of that chapter too.
He might have felt that, I mean, he was in the war for so long that coming out, he didn't feel right. So had to go a place where he knew about, that he was confident or felt, I don't know, well placed.
I think that he kind of thought his Vietnam as like a home, kind of almost.
Because
Not
it was
really,
for
like-
so long.
Safe
Yeah,
house.
like so many of his friends died there, and like he was there for a long time. That like it kind of molded into like he's familiar with it, and it's like his home. So like when he swims in the pond or whatever, it's like him kind of returning back to where, like returning to his friends.
Yeah, that's kind of like in a real world sense. If your family is located in one town, you move away, you're gonna eventually want to come back because that's where your family was located. And I'm guessing he thought of his friends as family, so then he needed to go back and get that closure.
Seeing familiar places helps bring back memories of things that happened at that place.
And I think those were good memories because for one of my journal entries, I did a quote from page 173, which is from that chapter. It says, "No ghosts, just a flat grassy field." So for once in Vietnam, I think what that means is that he's actually just seeing it as the country of Vietnam instead of a graveyard of all his friends.
All right. So I had another question that was, why do you think that O'Brien concludes the book with the story about Linda? And I said it was kind of like to let you know like where he got his start from and like how he started to realize that death wasn't fun, or not fun, but like a good thing. And like,
So,
I think he included that just so we would know how he started this, how he wanted to start this. So we would know where he came from, what changed him as a man.
it's an origin story. Anyone else? No? Okay, so I like the book. I like
Not again.
the middle.
Josh, what do you think?
Do you have any more questions or anything before we get to this?
Tyler, what do you think?
or does anybody have any quotes they want
I'm gonna
to?
conclude.
Oh, I got a quote. If I can find one.
Let's let Josh.
So the chapter where he went back to Vietnam and placed Kyo's moccasins in the river, that was his way of like dealing with Kyo's death. But I believe the other guy's name was Norman Bowker, the
Yeah.
guy that also felt responsible for Kyo's death and drove around the lake a bunch, and apparently a few years later killed himself because of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Different people respond to the same events differently. Thought that was a somewhat important theme in the book.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because
Never thought of it that way.
O'Brien was able to let go of the past and like, but what's his name? Bowker drove around the pond or the lake for like 6 hours or something, or until like midnight or whatever.
Yeah. Somewhere around in there.
He gave gas.
I think he stopped once for gas.
That's not an important question right now.
6 hours.
Well, at one point he went to a restaurant. And
Yeah.
He had like a flashback type deal.
Mhm.
Got kind of a quote that sums up, I think it sums up most of this story. It says, "Once you're alive, you can't ever be dead."
Right.
I think of this as, even if you do technically die, your story lives on,
Yep.
your legacy. So
Yep.
once you're alive, you can't ever be dead.
Yep, just
Once
like
you-
that.
Yeah, once you go there and you do your service or whatever, you will always be remembered for what you did.
Just
So-
like he remembers his friends, like Kyo.
Just like we remember people from several hundred years ago.
Or thousands.
Am I really that old? That sucks.
Does anyone have anything else to add to that, or we want to end there?
We good?
Cook him.
Okay.
Are we
Stop
good?
it. Just stop it.